Hello friends, it's Cindy Brumbaugh from CindyLeeBDesigns.com, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today I'd like to show you a fun Christmas card I made using a new bundle that'll be in the holiday catalog, September 5th, 2018, and it's the Dashing Deer bundle. You can find it on page 9. It includes the Dashing Deer bundle, fun images of 3 deer that are all cut out with the detailed deer thinlits. So you've got the big deer here that has like the tapestry print on him. You've got the deer that's eating and the deer that's looking to see that a hunter isn't getting him. You can cut all of those out. You also have the solid deer die cut that has a really fancy antler system on there. And it has 2 corner embellished dies that can embellish your corners and 7 flower dies. So 7 little flowers you can cut out at one time. So that's going to be a great asset to have with all the other stamp sets as well, and cards that you can make. So the detailed deer thinlits with the Dashing Deer stamp set makes that bundle at a 10% discount. So let's get started on looking at this card. So for this card, I used a color palette of Early Espresso, Cherry Cobbler, and Whisper White. So my card base was a half sheet of Early Espresso cardstock. So I just took on the 11-inch side and cut it at 5.5. So that gave me a 5.5 by 8.5, and I scored it at 4.25. And then that gives me a landscape card, A2 size card, that opens from the bottom. So the next thing I wanted to do on this card is put some different accents of the Cherry Cobbler. So what I did is I just took and cut a panel of Cherry Cobbler, and this is 4 by 5.25. That's just 1/8 inch in on all 4 sides. You'll get 4 by 5.25. So that will be the outside border. And also the inside of the card is also the same size. It gives a nice pleasing look having an 1/8 inch border around it. So this Whisper White on the inside is 4 inches by 5.25. So now we got to get to the work of the card. So what I did to start out to make this white focal point here that has the Snowdrift that is raised from the Woodlands embossed panel is I started out with a piece of Whisper White and I cut it to 5 inches by 4.5. So 5 inches by 4.5 inches. That was my Whisper White that I started with. Then I used a die that is in another stamp set called In the Woods, and it's on page 27. And this stamp set has framelits in the woods that are to die for too. Barren trees, winter trees, the pine tree. And the thing that is so valuable in this stamp set to me is this die right here. It's going to make perfect hills, snowdrifts, almost anything you could possibly imagine. So this die I would be putting onto that white panel. So let's just turn this over and I'll show you what I did. So the first thing I did was I stamped my sentiment, because then I would know exactly where I could place the die when I run it through the Big Shot. So I'm just going to ink up using Cherry Cobbler and make sure Happiest Christmas Wishes. And then I'm going to stamp it in the lower right-hand corner of my Whisper White. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through the Big Shot with this die in place. So I'm just going to put it so that I have a snowdrift on this side, and then it comes down and keeps that sentiment clear on the bottom right corner. So then after you run this through your Big Shot, die cutting it, whoop, you're going to end up with your die cutting this, but this die cut's a little shy of 5 inches. So what you're going to do is you'll see that it's connected a little bit on each side. So just take your paper snips, and this is very forgiving, and just snip right at the edges. So you just snip off that little piece there. There we go. You could also make your paper a scotch smaller than 5 inches, and then you wouldn't have to do that tedious thing of cutting there. So anyhow, then you're going to end up with these 2 pieces that are separate. So the next thing we're going to do is get this embossed using our Woodlands embossing folder. one of my favorite ones, this birch tree here. So what we're going to do is take this piece, let's set this aside here, and we're going to be putting it into the Woodlands embossing folder. Now, one thing you'll notice with this embossing folder is it seems to be like upside down. We're so used to putting our things in with the binding away from us because they're going to go into the big shot first. But this one, the trees are upside down this way, so you have to turn it so that the binding is opening towards you. So then you also want to make sure you have an embossed image. The first time I did this, I debossed it, and it still looked cute, but I really wanted it embossed. So what you're going to do is make sure that the words Sizzix and Stamping Up are facing up, and then you're going to take that upper piece that we die cut using that Thinlit die from the In the Woods framelits, and we're going to run this through the embossing, using our embossing sandwich through the Big Shot. And then we end up with these two pieces here. Okay, so now you'll look at this card and say, that doesn't really fit on there. So I'm going to show you how we put this together. So as this card was being an A2 size card, and we put the border of the cherry cobbler, we just had to go in another 1/8 of an inch. So your measurements whenever you're making a card being 5.5 by 4 1/4, and then you go into 4 by 5 1/4. So the next measurement is 3 3/4 by 5. So as I said, we started out with this being 5 and this was 4 1/2. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just bring in a little piece of scratch of my grid paper so you can see this. And what I want to do is make sure that this is going to be 3 3/4. So I'm just going to use my grid paper, which I use religiously every day. I'm going to put it at 4 3/4, knowing that is what the measurement I want it to be. So when I put it there, I'm going to be putting this bottom part of the card along this part. Then I'm going to know it is 3 3/4 by 5. So this is a great time to use up all of those edges that you have on your Stampin' dimensionals. So what I'm going to do is just put some dimensionals right along that Snowdrift. There we go. And then I'll just double check because I may have moved this here. 3 3/4 is my top measurement, and I'm lining it up so it's at 5 over here. And then I will just take my backing off of my dimensionals. Keeping it right in place. And then I'll just line this up with the bottom line here and adhere it. So now I've got that dimension there of the Snowdrift being raised up from the Woodlands embossed area in the back. So that can now be put onto my cherry cobbler. So we might as well just do that right now. I'll just get out my stamping adhesive, snail adhesive. I actually didn't have to put anything down here actually, but it might be a good idea to throw a dimensional down in that corner. Maybe actually 2 dimensionals here. Okay, so then we're going to put this onto the cherry cobbler. Border. There we go. And we might as well just go ahead and put it onto our card. Okay, and then we're going to put this onto our early espresso card base. There we go. Sometimes hard to see whenever I don't want to put my head into the camera. So there we've got our card done here almost. So the next thing we want to do is we want to stamp this cute little guy and his little friend. And we're going to stamp them in soft suede and then die cut them with the handy dandy dies that come along. And then I just did them with adhesive just directly on them. I could have popped them up, but I already popped up the Snowdrift, so I just went ahead and put this little guy down in here with his feet just covered by the snow. And then this one with his little tail up a little bit. There we go. And then all we have to do is put a cute sentiment on there. So what I did is I stamped "Remembering You this season with warm thoughts and a wish for everything merry." And then I cut it out with the next to the smallest stitched square in the Stitched Shapes framelits. So what I did there is I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on each, the left and right side. And just to add a little bit of embellishment to it, I put it on here and it just looked kind of plain just there. So I added some pennants on there. So I found this little trick out. I'm always trying to get my pennant ends to be the same size. So I'm sure that people do this all the time, but I just had one of those light bulb moments. But I took a piece of 5/8 by, this just happens to be 3 1/4, but it just a scrap because I'm not going to be using the whole thing. But I took it and I folded it in half. And when I folded it in half, then when I made my pennant end on it, I can be assured that and I'm just using my retired hexagon punch. I was just talking to my friend Kelly today that said, "Oh gosh, I need one of those." And I said, "Yes, you do, but it's retired." So now you have the pennant ends at exactly the same. So what I did next is I went ahead and cut. And now I know both sides are the same. And then I just took and put the pennant end on each side. And I added a little pearl at the end to give it a little more festive embellishment. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of room for me to throw on a pearl. There. And if you're not sure if you're getting it straight, just line it up and you can see that on the grid paper here, it's straight on both sides. This grid paper, I don't know what I would do without it. Sorry about that, moving the camera there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just adhere this to the front of my card. And I just use some dimensionals here. 1, 2. It's right on the verge of needing 4 on there. So then I just take the dimensional backs off and then put it on. Want to make sure I've got white showing, but I want about the same amount. The little deer butts up a little bit too high. There we go. Alrighty, and then I had some pearls, and of course they're tiny, so where did they go on my desk? Oh, there they are, way over by my catalog. So I just took 2 little pearls, used my paper piercer, another tool I could not live without, and I just put it right where the pennant end has that indentation there. And then I put one on each side. Very simple card to make. To finish off the inside, all I did was stamp another deer in soft suede right on the inside. So there you've got a very simple card, but it has a lot of wow to it because you put embossing on there, you've put some pearls, you've got the stitch shapes, the stitching on there, you've got some popping up there, but yet a relatively easy card. Using the Dashing Deer Bundle, page 9 of the new catalog coming out, the holiday catalog, on September 5th, 2018. If you have any questions about how to make this card, you can always text me or at 724-323-2296. Or you can email me at cindyleeb@gmail.com. Remember, all of the materials, measurements, colors that I've used on this card will be on the blog post, so make sure to jump on over to cindyleebdesigns.com. Thanks for buzzing by, friends.